Failed dialogue exposed, why Edgar Lungu still lies unburied. In Zambia and South Africa, one question refuses to fade. Why is Edgar Chagwa Lungu still not buried? Tonight, we take you inside the failed dialogue that was supposed to end the political standoff once and for all. But instead, it collapsed in confusion, mistrust, and behind-the-scenes power struggles. Why did key stakeholders walk out? Who sabotaged the process? And how did this dialogue, meant to bring closure, leave the nation even more divided? This is not just a political story. It's a story of power, pride, fear, and a family demanding dignity while the state insists on control. Stay with me, because what we uncover next will completely change how you understand this entire saga. Good day, viewers. Welcome to another edition of InspirAfrica Official. I'm Nakash. Well, it's been quite a week here, hasn't it? The rains are starting to fall across southern Africa, bringing both renewal and reflection. But today, we turn our attention to a story that refuses to find closure, a story that has gripped Zambia for nearly 6 months now. Our lead story today, the burial that never was. The dialogue that collapsed. The former president who remains frozen in time. Picture this, a former head of state, a man who once commanded armies, signed laws, and represented a nation on the world stage, now lies in a South African morgue, nearly 180 days after his death. His body has become a political hostage, caught between grief and grudges, between family wishes and state protocol, between what is written in law and what is whispered in corridors of power. What happens when a nation cannot bury its own president? What does it say about a democracy when the final resting place of a leader becomes a battlefield? When mediation fails, when courts rule but nothing changes, when dialogue is announced but trust is shattered, who pays the price? Is this about honoring tradition, or is it about settling scores? Is this about dignity for the deceased, or leverage for the living? When a lawyer becomes a family spokesperson and a burial becomes a campaign platform, where does mourning end and politics begin? And perhaps most disturbingly, if a former president can be denied medical travel, barred from political participation, and now kept unburied for half a year, what precedent does this set for Zambia's democracy? What message does it send about how we treat those who once held power? The clock is ticking. The morgue stays cold. And Zambia watches, waiting for an answer that never seems to come. Factual foundation, background and timeline. The revelation of this crisis came to light on June 5, 2025, when Edgar Chagwa Lungu, Zambia's 6th president, died at Mediclinic Medforum Hospital in Pretoria, South Africa. He was 68 years old, having traveled to South Africa for specialized medical treatment for cardiac complications related to a long-standing condition, achalasia, a rare disorder affecting the esophagus that he had battled since at least 2015. But here's where the story takes its first dark turn. According to family spokesperson Makibi Zulu, Lungu had repeatedly requested permission to travel abroad for medical care as early as 2022. Each request was denied by the Zambian government. In 2023, when Lungu offered to pay for his own treatment, the state responded with a letter dated September 7, 2023, explicitly denying his request. This wasn't for leisure or business, this was for his health. And the state knew about his condition. When doctors finally examined him in South Africa after he managed to leave the country in early 2025, medical professionals reportedly expressed that had he received treatment earlier, certain interventions could have been made. By then, it was too late. On the morning of June 5, during surgery, cardiac complications took his life. President Hakainde Hichilema immediately declared 7 days of national mourning. Flags flew at half-mast. A state funeral was announced, scheduled for June 22, with burial to follow at Embassy Park in Lusaka, the designated resting place for all Zambian presidents. But on June 18, just as Lungu's body was to be repatriated, the family pulled back. Spokesperson Makibi Zulu announced they would halt the process, citing broken trust and violated agreements. The family claimed the government had released a draft funeral program without consultation and had made public statements that contradicted private negotiations. Then came the bombshell. The family announced on June 20 that Lungu would be buried in South Africa instead, in a private ceremony, not a state funeral. This marked an unprecedented moment in Zambian history, a former head of state choosing exile even in death. On June 24, the Zambian government took legal action. Attorney General Mololo Kabesha filed an emergency application in South Africa's Pretoria High Court to halt the burial. On June 25, the very day of the scheduled private funeral, the court issued an order stopping the ceremony. Family members, dressed in black funeral attire, were forced to leave the burial service and attend a courtroom hearing instead. The legal battle intensified. On August 8, the Pretoria High Court ruled that Lungu's remains must be returned to Zambia for a state funeral. The family immediately filed an appeal. That appeal was rejected in early October. They filed again. Each legal maneuver bought more time, but no resolution. Meanwhile, mediation efforts began. Former Malawian President Bekele Muluzi was brought in as a mediator in August. By early November, he withdrew, stating that given the prevailing circumstances and the inability to secure a conclusive pathway forward, he could no longer continue. The mission had failed. As of today, November 30, 2025, Edgar Lungu has been dead for 178 days. His body remains in a South African morgue. No burial date has been set. The dialogue that was supposed to resolve this crisis has collapsed. Direct evidence. Let's hear from those at the center of this crisis in their own words. Mkibi Zulu, family spokesperson. In a public address shortly after Lungu's death, Zulu laid out the family's grievances. Fellow countrymen and women, this is an address on behalf of the family of President Edgar Chagwa Lungu, the 6th Republican President of the Republic of Zambia. Sometime in 2022, he requested to travel for medicals in South Africa. The state rejected that request. That request was re-emphasized in 2023. The state responded by stating that it had no resources. In his response to the state, he stated that he would use his own resources. The state responded in a letter dated the 7th of September, 2023, stating that his request was denied. Notwithstanding that the said travel was not for leisure or business, but for his health to be attended to. He continued with a damning allegation. You will note that upon his travel, doctors in South Africa did express a concern, to say that had he traveled earlier, they could have made certain interventions that would have sent him away. And this would not be the discussion today. On the burial impasse. Addressing ongoing negotiations, or lack thereof, Zulu stated in late August. We wish to acknowledge that government through the Secretary to Cabinet Mr. Patrick Kangwa has approached the family to initiate formal negotiations. We pray for sincerity and decency to prevail as the environment for suggested negotiations is being fostered in a hope for subsequent resolution of this matter. When trust is broken, deliberate and genuine steps must be taken to rebuild it. But trust remained elusive. In October, Zulu released another statement revealing clandestine government operations. Despite an agreement for mediation announced on September 5, 2025, the government secretly engaged in clandestine operations while pretending to act in good faith. Among the most alarming incidents was the hiring of a private investigator and plainclothes police officers who allegedly tried to access the South African morgue where the late president's body is kept. President Hakainde Hichilema. On June 19, as the national mourning period was abruptly ended, President Hichilema addressed the nation. Despite reaching an agreement on June 15, the family's abrupt refusal to proceed on June 18 necessitated the conclusion of the official mourning to allow the nation to return to normalcy. He, Lungu, deserved to be buried in Zambia with full honors. Our doors, as government, remain open for further engagement, as appropriate. But tensions continued. In late August, the family accused Hichilema of negotiating in bad faith, claiming he had violated an agreement for both government and family to refrain from public statements about the burial. Attorney General Mololo Kabesha. After the August 8 court ruling ordering repatriation, Kabesha stated to South African media, "He's not a refugee. The government wants a state funeral for Lungu to ensure that all Zambian citizens can pay their respects in a dignified and appropriate way." Former mediator Bekele Muluzi. In his withdrawal statement this November, Muluzi reflected on the failed mediation. Given the prevailing circumstances and the inability to secure a conclusive pathway forward, it has now become necessary to withdraw from the mediation process. I remain deeply appreciative of Hakainde Hichilema, President of the Republic of Zambia, for his readiness to receive my calls and consider my humble counsel. Attempts to secure direct dialogue among all parties did not fully succeed, and therefore the situation has not yet reached final resolution. He urged continued compassion. I respectfully encourage continued prayers and compassion, particularly for the former First Lady, Esther Lungu, the children, and the extended family. Political commentary. Ambassador Anthony Makwita, author of Lungu's biography, wrote in an emotional piece marking what would have been Lungu's 68th birthday on November 11th. Frozen in time since June 5, the 6th president of Zambia lies unburied, caught in a diplomatic and legal rut that mocks the humility he lived by and the dignity he died with. President Lungu's frozen fate must be the last of its kind. Zambia has no law on burying dead presidents. Let his pain birth policy. Let his death unite Zambia, not divide it. Political analyst Kapia Kaoma wrote shortly after Lungu's death. The chilling revelation that former President Edgar Chagwa Lungu was repeatedly denied permission to travel abroad for urgent medical care even when he offered to pay from his own pocket is nothing short of morally outrageous. That he had to slip out of the country like a fugitive, stripped of the dignity befitting his former office, and that those who assisted him were swiftly fired, raises a sobering question: what kind of politics are we practicing? The words hang heavy in the air. Accusations. Counter-accusations. Grief mixed with grievance. And still, no burial. Deeper analysis, implications and reactions. Reflective music. This is no longer just about Edgar Lungu. This is about what happens when political rivalry outlives the rivals themselves. This is about institutions, precedents, and the very fabric of democratic transition. The constitutional question. At the heart of this dispute lies a fundamental tension in Zambian law. The government argues that Section 60 of the Constitution requires all former presidents to be buried at Embassy Park with full state honors. The family counters that personal and family rights cannot be completely overridden by the state, especially when the deceased allegedly left specific instructions about who should preside over his funeral. Legal experts remain divided. Some argue that the dignity of the presidential office requires uniformity in how former heads of state are honored. Others contend that such rigid enforcement, particularly in the face of family objection, sets a dangerous precedent for state overreach into private grief. The political dimension. The timing cannot be ignored. Lungu's final years were marked by intense political conflict with President Hichilema. After losing the 2021 election, Lungu attempted a political comeback. In December 2024, Zambia's constitutional court ruled him ineligible to run again, citing the two-term limit. His retirement benefits were withdrawn. His family members, including his wife Esther and daughter Tassila, faced multiple corruption charges, which they claimed were politically motivated persecution. Tassila Lungu, now a member of parliament for Chawama constituency, was arrested in February 2025 on money laundering charges. The family maintains these prosecutions are part of a vendetta by the Hichilema administration. Against this backdrop, the burial dispute takes on added meaning. Is this about honoring a president, or is this about political control? Is this about national unity, or is this about ensuring the opposition cannot turn Lungu's burial into a rallying moment? The mediation failures. Multiple mediation attempts have collapsed. After Maluzi's withdrawal, Zambian church leaders, including Archbishop Alec Banda and Bishop Joshua H.K. Banda, were appointed as co-mediators in September. But those talks too have stalled, with the family accusing government-linked individuals of spreading falsehoods about the mediators and conducting surveillance operations. The Oasis Forum, a coalition of civil society groups including churches, has called for genuine dialogue. In a statement published just yesterday, they warned that Zambia cannot resolve its constitutional crisis while it cannot even resolve this burial impasse. How do we amend a constitution when we cannot even resolve a simple family nation dispute with compassion and urgency? The human cost. Behind all the legal arguments and political maneuvering is a widow. Esther Lungu has now spent 6 months unable to bury her husband. Whatever one's political views, this is a woman in mourning complicated by public spectacle, legal battles in foreign courts, and accusations flying from all sides. Mkibi Zulu, the family lawyer and spokesperson, has himself become a controversial figure. Some view him as a principled advocate fighting for family rights. Others see him as an opportunist using the Lungu name for political ambition. He is, notably, running for the presidency of the Patriotic Front Party, with some suggesting his leadership campaign is tied to his handling of this burial saga. Regional implications. This dispute has embarrassed Zambia on the regional stage. South African courts have been forced to adjudicate an internal Zambian matter because the body lies in their jurisdiction. Regional leaders have watched with concern. Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa, who was close to Lungu, has remained largely silent, a silence that speaks volumes about the discomfort this situation creates for SADC unity. The precedent problem. Perhaps most troubling is what this means for the future. If a former president can remain unburied for 6 months, if dialogue can fail this completely, what does that say about Zambia's ability to manage political transitions peacefully? What does it mean for future leaders who may find themselves on the losing side of elections? As one political observer noted, everything is funny until it happens to you. Today, it has happened to Zambia. The path forward, or lack thereof. Both sides claim to want resolution, but neither will compromise. The government insists on Embassy Park and a state funeral. The family insists on respecting Lungu's alleged final wishes that Hichilema not preside over the ceremony. Between these two positions lies an impasse that has proven unbridgeable. The Supreme Court of South Africa is expected to hear further appeals, but legal observers predict this could drag on for months or even years. Meanwhile, the morgue bill continues to accumulate, and the political capital expended on this dispute continues to grow. So where does this leave us, viewers? 6 months. 178 days. A former president remains unburied. Dialogue has failed, not once, but repeatedly. Courts have ruled, yet nothing changes. Mediators have withdrawn. Trust has evaporated. This is not just a Zambian story. This is a cautionary tale about what happens when political grievances outlast political lives. When institutions meant to foster unity instead deepen divisions. When grief becomes a weapon and mourning becomes a campaign. The questions we asked at the beginning remain unanswered. Who bears responsibility when dialogue fails? Is it the family, insisting on what they claim are the deceased's wishes? Is it the government, prioritizing protocol over compromise? Is it the courts, applying law without room for compassion? Or is it all of us, for allowing politics to poison even death? Edgar Lungu may have passed away on June 5, 2025, but his story is far from over. In fact, it may just be beginning as a parable for our times, a warning about the cost of unresolved conflict, and a mirror reflecting back to us the state of our democracy. Pause. Thank you for watching this edition of InspirAfrica Official. This is a story we'll continue to follow closely. I want to hear from you. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think the family has a right to bury Lungu in South Africa according to his wishes? Or does the state have an obligation to bring him home? Where should the line be drawn between personal rights and national interest? Let's have that conversation. We'll be back tomorrow with more stories from across the continent, stories that matter, stories that challenge us, stories that refuse to let us look away. Until then, this is Nakash, reminding you to stay informed, stay engaged, and stay hopeful even when the news makes hope difficult. Take care, and we'll see you tomorrow.